speaking of the American response, US President Joe Biden has defended Israel's raid on Gaza's largest hospital. He repeated Israeli statements that Hamas had its headquarters beneath al-Shifa. But neither Israel nor the United States has provided evidence to back up those claims.
Here's the situation. You have a circumstance where the first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital. And that's a fact. That's what's happened. Israel did not go in with a large number of troops, did not raid, did not rush everything down. They've gone in, and they've gone in with their soldiers carrying weapons, their guns. They were told, let me be precise. We've discussed the need for them to be incredibly careful.
Well, let's bring in Jeremy Scahill. He's an independent journalist and a co-founder of the Intercept news website. He joins us now from Frankfurt in Germany. Jeremy, I want to ask you about the tone of those comments there that we heard from Biden. He's obviously chosen to continue doubling down on the Israeli claim that there's this Hamas command center in or under al-Shifa. What do you make of his call?
Well, it's not surprising. I mean, Joe Biden, in many ways, is staking his credibility right now on Israeli intelligence. And the Israelis have a multi-decade track record of lying, of promoting false information, of releasing doctored videos. The United States, going back to the Iraq War, certainly has its own experience with promoting false intelligence. So this is a real gamble. And I think that what we've seen is Joe Biden using his bully pulpit as the most powerful leader of the most powerful country in the world to give cover for the Israelis to continue their rampage. This is a Dresden-style bombing of Gaza where the Israelis have targeted civilians. Yes, targeted civilians. 1 in 200 Gazans have been killed. So what I think we saw here is the President of the United States, who for 50 years has been one of the staunchest backers of Israel's worst war crimes, once again sticking his neck out. And we're told that there's essentially like a Hamas pentagon underneath the Shifa hospital. Maybe that's true. Maybe the Israelis are going to shock the world and they're going to provide that proof. But the fact of the matter is that al-Shifa hospital is desperately needed. There are children, babies who were in the NICU. There are babies that have died because of Israel's military operations. And so what the United States is doing in the form of Joe Biden, the president, is co-signing systemic Israeli war crimes and the raising of a population of 2.2 million people, 1 in 200 of whom have now been killed since October 7th.
Jeremy, I was looking at a bit of the history here. And if I understand correctly, Israel built a bunker under al-Shifa back in the 1980s, and they spoke about it fairly openly at the time. So what would the discovery of an underground facility there mean if they do actually find one?
Right. And it's not uncommon for hospitals the world over to have some infrastructure underneath it, especially if you're in a country where there's constant fighting. And our understanding is that in 1983, the Israelis built some underground tunnels and an underground operating room. So, right off the bat, we have to say this, if the Israelis simply reveal that there are tunnels under there or a room, it's because Israel built them. Now, what Israel alleges is that Hamas expanded that network of tunnels and built more structures underneath it. And, it's not a secret. Many journalists have met with Hamas members in or around the vicinity of al-Shifa hospital. The question is, were they using it for a military purpose? I watched the initial so-called evidence that the Israelis have released. I'm an American from the United States. We're awash in guns. I've seen more guns in the homes of ordinary Americans than I've seen in this purported Hamas pentagon under al-Shifa hospital.
Jeremy, are we at a turning point potentially in this conflict? Will what is or isn't underneath al-Shifa hospital, will that change minds, either in Israel, elsewhere?
I don't think that this specific raid that Israel is doing is going to change mind. I think what it's going to do is accentuate the position that people have already started to take on who the real, who is the gratuitous party here. Certainly, Hamas deserves condemnation for butchering civilians. More than 800 civilians were killed on October 7th. But the fact is that Israel, a member of the United Nations, a nation state that is showered with American money and weapons, is committing systematic war crimes. And I think that, 75 years we've been watching this pogrom against the Palestinian people. And I think the world is finally waking up on a level that is unprecedented. So what I think Israel miscalculated. I think they miscalculated in the extent of what they did. And I think that many nation states, and there's dissent in the United States like we haven't seen since the Iraq War. We now have 24 members of Congress calling for a ceasefire. You have heads of state around the world openly accusing Israel of killing babies. This is a shift that Israel has not been under this kind of global pressure ever.
Well, let me ask you then about Biden's relationship to Netanyahu now. I know you've written about his close support for Israel throughout his career. You mentioned that earlier, but how does he actually get along with Netanyahu, the man? How's that whole dynamic going?
Oh, I mean, they couldn't be bigger buddies. You know, Joe Biden is kind of what likes to portray himself as a kind of folksy guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he repeatedly tells the same stories. He says about Netanyahu, oh, I love you, Bibi, but I don't believe a damn thing or I don't agree with a damn thing you ever say. Netanyahu brags about his 30-year friendship with Biden. Netanyahu notoriously couldn't stand Barack Obama, so Biden was often in the position of sort of placating Netanyahu as Obama and Netanyahu had clashes. But Joe Biden, for 50 years in U.S. public office, has been one of the primary facilitators of some of the worst excesses of Israel's policy. In fact, sometimes Joe Biden has taken a position that has been more extreme than Israeli leaders. In the invasion of Lebanon in the early 80s, the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin said that Joe Biden was saying that it was justifiable to kill civilians in Lebanon. And Menachem Begin himself is a war criminal from the 1940s, from the original Nakba. So for Menachem Begin to have been shocked at Joe Biden encouraging or sort of justifying the killing of civilians speaks volumes. Joe Biden also says you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. He said, I'm Israel's best Catholic friend. No, Joe Biden knows exactly what he's doing. He's very close to Netanyahu, and he's given cover for some really horrifying war crimes that apparently are going to continue.
Jeremy Scahill there, a co-founder of the Intercept news website, speaking to us from Frankfurt, Germany. Thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera, Jeremy.
Thank you.